Titan retired 6 months later. No ceremony this time, no speeches, just a simple transfer of paperwork, a few dry signatures, and the quiet thud of his badge placed into Hernandez's calloused hand. Most officers celebrated their canine's retirement like a victory lap, a chance to show off years of service. Hernandez didn't need that. Titan didn't either. Their bond was never built for display. The day they left the station for the last time, Titan didn't look back once. He climbed into the passenger seat of Hernandez's old truck with a grunt, circled once, and dropped his weight against the seat like he had always belonged there. No vest, no badge, just him, just them. Home wasn't far. A small plot of land outside the city, bought with every overtime check Hernandez had saved. Not much, an old fence, a weathered porch, a patch of woods out back where Titan could chase rabbits he'd never quite catch. But it was theirs. Freedom came slowly for Titan. At first he would still stand when the radio crackled, still glance at Hernandez for a command that never came, still position himself between his partner and every stranger who dared cross their path. But little by little, the stiffness faded. He learned to chase shadows instead of criminals, learned to sleep in late, legs twitching, in dreams he didn't have to wake up from ready for battle. And Hernandez? He learned too. Learned that saving the world didn't always happen in uniform. Sometimes it happened in small, silent ways, like tending a scarred dog who had once carried the weight of 100 broken nights, like rebuilding trust in something bigger than the job, like staying, because staying had always been the hardest thing. They never spoke about the alley again, never spoke about the van, or the faces found in the dark, or the nights Hernandez still woke up choking on guilt for all the ones they couldn't save. Titan understood without words. Some things were carried, not cured. But when Hernandez sat out on the porch at dusk, boots crossed at the ankles, beer sweating in his hand, Titan would press his head against his knee the way he had done 100 times before. A quiet reminder. We stayed. We fought. We mattered. The world moved on, the way it always does. New headlines replaced old ones. New heroes rose and fell. But somewhere, on a quiet stretch of forgotten land, a German shepherd with silver creeping into his muzzle still trotted after his best friend through tall grass, unburdened by medals, unchained by expectations. Just loyal, just free, just home. If this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, for every unseen act of courage, for every soul who stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. Leave a comment below and tell us who's been your Titan, who stood by you even when the world wasn't watching. And subscribe for more stories like this, stories that remind us the quiet heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they walk beside us on 4 legs, asking for nothing, except to be allowed to stay. It was a storm that changed everything, the kind that tears the sky apart, electric and furious, slamming rain against windows and ripping branches from trees. The estate lost power. The fancy generator failed, and for the first time, the estate was swallowed by a darkness as deep and thick as the one Lily lived in every day. Clover panicked. She screamed, a shrill, broken sound that shattered the calm facade of the stables. She kicked her stall door so hard that the hinges tore free, metal screeching against metal. She bolted through the open courtyard, hooves thundering against the cobblestones slick with rain, eyes rolling white with terror. Charles cursed, running through the house, fumbling in the dark for flashlights and candles. He didn't see Clover crashing toward the house, didn't see the way she circled the southern wall, nostrils flaring, didn't realize that her terror wasn't random. It was focused. It was furious. When Clover found the basement door, she didn't hesitate. She reared up once, twice, slamming her hooves into the heavy wood. Splinters flew. Somewhere deep inside the house, alarms wailed weakly, useless without power to back them. Charles shouted, stumbling toward the noise, flashlight beam bobbing wildly. And that was when he saw her. The mare he'd bought for status, now wild-eyed and feral, battering the one door he had never meant anyone to find. The flashlight slipped from his hands, rolled across the floor, and for the first time in all his carefully constructed life, Charles McAllister felt something colder than guilt. He felt fear. Below, in the dark, Lily heard it, the pounding, the crashing, the animal roar cutting through the silence she had believed was eternal, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone was coming for her. Clover didn't stop. Even as Charles shouted, even as workers came stumbling out of the servants' quarters with ropes and poles, she kept hammering her hooves against the basement door, splintering the thick oak that had held its secrets for far too long. Rain soaked her mane, turned her gray coat a shimmering black, but she didn't falter. It was as if something ancient, something bigger than her bloodline and breeding, had taken hold, a primal force that refused to let a child die in the dark. Inside, Lily pressed herself against the farthest wall, hands covering her ears. She didn't understand the noise, the chaos, the vibration of hope cracking the walls around her. Hope was a dangerous thing. She had learned not to trust it, but even through the fear, her body recognized something she hadn't felt in a long time, the sound of someone fighting for her. Above, Charles backed away from the stairwell, panic clouding his judgment. The estate staff, handpicked to protect his image, hesitated. None of them dared step between him and the collapsing door. It wasn't loyalty, it was fear, the kind of fear that grows when powerful men build walls no one else is allowed to question. The door cracked once more, and then, with a final splintering crash, it gave way. Clover stumbled through the frame, hooves skidding on the damp floor, nostrils flaring. She paused, searching the dark with wide, frantic eyes. Somewhere in that wreckage of forgotten sins, she smelled it, the sharp, metallic tang of fear that wasn't hers, a fear too small, too fragile, too wrong to ignore. She whinnied, high and clear. It wasn't rage anymore, it was a call, a beacon. At that exact moment, headlights flared at the gate. Sheriff Monroe answering a noise complaint from neighbors who'd heard the alarms over the storm. At first it was routine, a welfare check on one of the richest men in the county, nothing more. But when Monroe saw the torn fences, the busted door, the mayor standing guard at the gaping maw of the McAllister estate, something shifted in his gut. His instincts, honed over decades, told him this wasn't storm damage. It was something else. Something rotten, finally clawing its way to the surface. Hernandez and two deputies barreled through the estate's main entrance minutes later, guns drawn, flashlights slicing through the darkness. Charles was nowhere to be seen. His staff scattered like leaves before a gale, none daring to meet the officers' eyes. The sound led them, not human voices, but Clover's steady, rhythmic stomping, guiding them to the broken door. They found the staircase yawning below, the scent of mildew and terror coiling up from the pit. The first deputy hesitated, hand tightening on his weapon. But Monroe didn't. He descended, one slow step at a time, into the dark. At the bottom he found Lily, curled into herself, skin pale and bruised, but alive. Her eyes, wide, wild, terrified, locked onto his, and for a moment he couldn't move. All the training, all the procedures drilled into him, melted under the weight of that stare. She wasn't just another case. She was a life that had almost been erased. He knelt, lowering the gun, lowering his voice. "It's all right, sweetheart," he whispered, reaching out a hand. "You're safe now." Lily hesitated. Then, slowly, shakily, she reached back. Outside, Clover stood at the door, her body a barrier between the world and the darkness it had allowed to fester. Her sides heaved with exhaustion, but she didn't move, didn't falter, because she knew, in the way only animals truly know, that staying mattered, that standing between good and evil wasn't just a human duty. It was a living one. Charles McAllister was arrested 2 hours later, pulled from a crawl space beneath the east wing where he had tried to hide. His face, once celebrated in charity galas and political fundraisers, twisted into a sneer as cameras flashed, broadcasting his downfall across every network. No amount of money or influence could rewrite what the police found. No publicist could erase the reality Clover had ripped open for the world to see. Investigations followed. Other victims came forward, other doors, other basements, other names. The town that once revered him burned every trace of his legacy to ash. But none of them forgot who had lit the match. In the weeks that followed, Clover became more than a horse. She became a symbol of instincts trusted, of innocence defended, of loyalty that needed no language to speak volumes. News crews descended on the estate, now abandoned, capturing the image of the aging mare standing quietly at the edge of the broken pasture. When the news aired, people wept openly, not just for the evil revealed, but for the fact that, in a world so willing to look away, something pure had refused to be silent. And in a tiny hospital bed miles away, Lily clutched a stuffed animal someone had given her, a toy horse, gray with a white star painted on its forehead, and whispered to the nurse who tucked her in, "The horse saved me." No fairy tales, no fantasy, just the truth, plain and shining. Because sometimes heroes wear armor, and sometimes they wear dust and scars and a heart that won't back down. They didn't expect Lily to speak. Not after everything. The doctors used the word selective mutism as if it were a switch someone had turned off in her chest. Trauma, they said, deep-rooted, layered. It might take months, maybe years, maybe never. Her caseworker nodded, not disagreeing. But inside, she wondered what could possibly bloom in a child who had spent so long underground, swallowed by cold and darkness and the sound of her own heartbeat echoing in cement. Lily didn't resist care. She let them bathe her, dress her in soft cotton clothes, feed her warm food in small bites. But her eyes stayed far away. Like the part of her that mattered hadn't come back from that basement at all. They gave her toys, therapy sessions, even a small room with fairy lights and a plush rug shaped like a cloud. Still, she sat curled in the corner, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes always trained on the door. But then came the photo. It wasn't deliberate, just a printout taped to the staff bulletin board at the group home, a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "The Horse That Brought Down a Billionaire," and underneath, a photo of Clover standing beneath the broken estate gates, mane tangled, ears forward, fire still alive in her stance. Lily stood up. She walked barefoot down the hall and tugged at the hem of the nurse's scrubs, pointed at the photo. Her mouth opened. "Her," she said. Just that. One word, cracked and small, but real. The nurse dropped to her knees in shock, and Lily, like something thawing in spring, whispered again, "She found me." It didn't take long after that. They arranged a visit. No cameras, no press, just one child, one caseworker, and a trailer heading toward a pasture that had become sacred ground. Clover was older now. The stress of the storm, the burst stall door, the long weeks of investigation had taken a toll on her body. Her legs stiffened in the cold. Her breathing wheezed if she moved too fast, but her eyes still burned. When Lily stepped out of the car, the girl was still quiet, still wrapped in her own smallness. But Clover looked up, took a step forward. No trainer had to guide her. No leash, no whistle, no click of command. She walked straight toward Lily and stopped just inches away, lowered her head, waited. Lily reached out, one trembling hand brushing Clover's warm nose. Her eyes filled, and for the first time since the basement, since the silence, since the world fell apart, Lily smiled. Not a full one, not wide. But it was enough. They let Lily visit every week. Sometimes she'd bring carrots, sometimes drawings, sometimes just herself. She didn't talk much, didn't have to. Clover understood the language of stillness, of standing nearby, of choosing to stay. They would sit together in the field, the mare resting her head in Lily's lap as the sun dipped behind the trees. And every so often, Clover would lift her head, as if scanning the horizon for danger, as if promising, even now, not again, not while I'm here. Word spread fast about the bond between them. What began as a private healing turned into something much larger. Schools sent letters, children wrote cards, people showed up just to look at the pasture and say thank you. A small non-profit, the Clover Foundation, was founded with community funds, focused on rescuing abused animals and supporting children from violent homes. And at the heart of it, still grazing quietly behind a white fence that had once divided wealth from reality, was Clover. No fanfare, no spotlight, just her and the girl she refused to forget. When winter came again, Clover slowed. Her steps were heavier, her breath more shallow. The vet said her time was close. The staff prepared for it, gently, respectfully. But when the final morning came, it came gently. Clover laid down in the sun, her nose brushing the edge of a scarf Lily had dropped the week before. She closed her eyes, and she stayed. Because in the end, she didn't need to be rescued. She had already done what she came to do. They buried Clover under the old oak tree at the edge of the pasture, the same place where she used to watch over the land like a sentinel. There was no ceremony, no orchestration, just quiet footsteps through morning dew and the gentle rustle of branches overhead. It had rained the night before, and the earth was soft, like it understood the weight of what was being asked. A small group gathered, volunteers from the shelter, a few townspeople, 2 veterinarians who had cared for her in her last days, and of course, Lily. She stood in a pale yellow dress, bare feet pressing into the damp grass, her arms wrapped tightly around a worn fleece blanket someone had given her during her first night at the group home, the one she had never let go of. In her hand, she held a green ribbon, frayed, weathered. It had once been Clover's rein, something purely functional, meant to guide and control. Now, in Lily's fingers, it was a crown, a keepsake, a memory woven into fabric. The grave was marked not by marble or iron, but by a plank of cedar, sanded smooth and sealed with oil. It bore a single word carved carefully by one of the ranch hands who had refused payment for the work. Stayed. No name, no dates. Because Clover had never needed those things to matter. In the days that followed, the pastures felt too quiet. Horses were fed, stalls were cleaned, but something had shifted. A stillness not from absence, but from reverence. And then, quietly, something began to bloom in her place. It started with Lily. She began spending more time near the oak tree, bringing bits of chalk and sitting cross-legged by the stump of a fallen log. At first, she just traced shapes. Flowers, suns, stick figures with wild hair. Then came color, bold, defiant, unashamed. She drew a gray horse, big eyes, arched neck, the outline of a girl standing beside her. Every day she added more, the fence in the background, the tree, the swirling clouds. One afternoon a counselor saw her and sat nearby. "You miss her?" she asked gently. Lily didn't speak at first. She just nodded, the kind that says more than words. Then she pointed at the drawing. "She didn't leave when I needed her. So I'm going to stay now, for someone else." That same counselor took the idea to the board. What if this wasn't just a shelter? What if it became something more? A place where animals no one wanted could teach children who had been taught they didn't matter, that they did. The nonprofit grew roots quickly. Word had already spread about Lily and Clover, not from tabloids, but from whispered awe. From people who visited the farm and left different than they arrived. A few families offered land. One contractor donated labor to rebuild the barns. A teacher from the city offered to volunteer every Saturday. The Clover Foundation was born not with funding proposals, but with truth. Truth that healing didn't always happen in silence. That love didn't always come from the people you expected. That presence was more powerful than protection. By the time summer came, they had reopened 3 barns, brought in 7 rescue horses, and launched a pilot program with the state. 10 children, each one carrying their own invisible weight. Some spoke, some didn't. Some raged against everything and everyone. Some curled up and refused to move, but every single one of them responded to the horses. Not immediately, not magically, but eventually. There was one boy, Devon, who hadn't made eye contact in months. When he met Chance, an ex-racehorse who flinched at every sudden movement, he reached out and placed his hand on the animal's flank without a word. Chance didn't move. Neither did Devon, and that was enough. That Lily became the heart of the foundation, without anyone asking her to be. She led by showing up, by holding brushes and stories and silences. She guided new kids through the barns, taught them how to clean hooves, where to stand, when to whisper. She didn't explain the rules. She embodied them. The rule was simple. Stay. Stay through the tantrums. Stay through the quiet. Stay through the storm, because that's what Clover had done for her. Sometimes, when a new child arrived, tense, guarded, unsure, Lily would take their hand and walk them past the main barn and down toward the old oak tree. They'd stop at the simple cedar marker with the word "stayed," and Lily would kneel, placing a stone or flower or pine cone beside it. She wouldn't say much, just, "She's still watching. She stayed for me. I'll stay for you." It was always enough. The program began to expand, not because they sought exposure, but because the story couldn't be kept in one place. People started calling from other counties. Families asked if they could bring their children. Social workers started rewriting referrals. Send to Clover. The ranch didn't become famous. It became sacred. A place where the broken weren't fixed, but listened to. Where healing wasn't forced, but chosen. Where pain wasn't erased, but transformed into something softer, something livable, something human. And through it all, Lily stayed. She grew taller, stronger, her voice steadier. She laughed more often, slept deeper. But she never stopped returning to the tree. Because there are some debts that aren't meant to be paid back, only paid forward. Years later, when people talked about the Clover Foundation, they didn't speak in numbers or case studies. They spoke in stories. They spoke about a boy who finally laughed again after years of silence, about a girl who braided a horse's mane with shaking hands and learned, thread by thread, that she could trust her own touch, about teenagers who didn't know how to say, "I'm hurting," but learned to say it by standing beside a creature that didn't expect them to be anything more than present. They spoke about Lily, too, though not in the way one speaks about a survivor. They spoke of her as a founder, as a guide, as the girl who showed them that you didn't have to be whole to begin building something that mattered. Lily never forgot Clover. She didn't try to. She didn't move on the way grief counselors sometimes said you were supposed to. She moved forward with Clover, carried her memory like a lantern, not a chain. Each spring, Lily returned to the oak tree. She would kneel by the wooden marker, now weathered and worn but still standing, and place something new there, a sprig of lavender, a carved stone, a single feather. Small tokens to say, "I'm still here. I'm still staying." 1 year, when the pasture had filled with more horses than the original foundation had ever dreamed, Lily found a new filly standing shyly at the back of the herd, gray as mist, eyes deep and watchful. She smiled, a bittersweet ache blooming behind her ribs. She named her Hope, not because she wanted to replace Clover, nothing could, but because she understood now. Hope isn't about forgetting what broke you. It's about choosing to keep building anyway. The oak tree grew wider with every year, its roots gripping the earth tighter, its branches stretching farther toward the sky. Beneath its shade, generations of children and horses came and went. Some stayed only for a season, some stayed longer. All of them left carrying something invisible, a sturdiness stitched into their bones by a story that had begun not with a triumph, but with a choice. The choice to stay, the choice to listen, the choice to love without demanding anything in return. Today, if you walk through the pastures at dusk, you might still see Lily, grown now, her hair caught in the evening breeze, standing beside the tree. You might see children laughing over muddy boots and half-finished chores. You might hear the soft, rhythmic snort of a horse brushing its nose against a child's hand. And if you listen closely enough, you might catch it too, the echo of a promise made by hooves striking oak, by a heart that refused to give up even when the world wasn't watching. A promise that said, "You are not forgotten, you are not alone, I stayed, and you can too." If this story touched something in you, don't let it stop here. Share it. For every clover who stood guard without being asked, for every lily who dared to believe again. Comment below with a story of someone or some creature who stayed for you when you needed it most. And subscribe for more stories that remind us sometimes the bravest thing we can do isn't to run or to fight, it's to stay. And in that staying, we become the heroes we once needed.